You think you know how this goes? The powerful underworld boss walks into a room, insults the lowly waitress in a foreign language to flex his ego, and she shrinks away. Not tonight. When the head of the city's most brutal syndicate called her a pathetic stray in perfect Arabic, he expected silence. Instead, she looked him dead in the eye, didn't miss a beat, and called him a coward. That was the exact moment her quiet life ended, and something entirely more dangerous began. Stick around because this isn't your typical fairy tale. The espresso machine at L'Etoile had a specific mechanical whine right before it pushed steam. Nora knew it intimately. It was the soundtrack to her migraine, the high-pitched squeal that meant hour 9 of a 10-hour shift was slowly bleeding to a close. Her feet throbbed, the kind of deep, bone-bruising ache that didn't go away when you sat down, but rather settled into your joints to remind you of your tax bracket. She wiped the stainless steel counter with a damp rag, smelling bleach and the lingering scent of truffle oil. The restaurant was ostensibly closed to the public, the front doors locked, the "closed for private event" sign hanging in the frosted glass window. But the real money didn't care about closing times. In the center of the main dining room, surrounded by empty tables and dim amber lighting, sat Roman. Nora didn't know his last name, and she didn't want to. The staff just called him the client. He was a regular, but not the kind who left Yelp reviews. He was the kind who brought his own security detail, men who stood by the exits with uncomfortable bulges under their tailored jackets. Roman himself didn't look like a cartoon mobster. He didn't wear fedoras or chew on cigars. He looked like a hedge fund manager who hadn't slept in a month. Sharp jaw, ash-brown hair clipped short, and eyes that held the flat, deadened calm of a deep winter lake. Tonight, he was entertaining guests, 3 men with expensive watches and cheap manners. Table 4 needs another bottle of the Barolo, the floor manager David hissed as he brushed past her. His forehead was slick with nervous sweat. And for God's sake, Nora, don't look them in the eye. Just pour and vanish. Pour and vanish, she repeated, her voice dry. My specialty. She grabbed the heavy dark bottle from the staging area. Her back twinged. She was 28, but the past 3 years had aged her a decade. A dishonorable discharge from military intelligence, a mountain of her brother's medical debt, and a severely limited skill set for the civilian world had landed her here. Pouring wine for murderers, Nora approached the table. The men were deep in conversation. Roman sat at the head, leaning back, a glass of water resting in his loose grip. He wasn't drinking. He rarely did. The Port Authority is locked down, one of the guests, a thick-necked man with a heavy Russian accent, was saying. We cannot move the containers until the strike breaks. The strike will break by Tuesday, Roman replied. His voice was a low rumble, devoid of inflection. I've made sure the union rep understands the stakes. Nora stepped into the space between Roman and the Russian. She kept her eyes on the crisp white tablecloth, her hands steady as she unsealed the Barolo and began to pour. She was invisible. The help. A piece of furniture that happened to bleed. The Russian gestured wildly, his hand clipping the edge of the silver breadbasket. It tipped, sliding toward the edge of the table. Nora caught it with her free hand, a reflex born of years waiting tables, but the sudden movement caused a single drop of the dark red wine to splash onto the pristine white linen. It was a tiny speck, like a drop of blood on snow. The conversation stopped. Nora froze. She didn't apologize immediately. In her experience with men like this, apologizing just drew attention to the weakness. She simply set the bottle down, grabbed the small white cloth from her apron, and dabbed the spot. Roman watched her. He didn't look angry. He looked profoundly bored. He leaned across the table toward the Russian, but he kept his eyes on Nora. When he spoke, the language shifted. It wasn't English. It wasn't Russian. It was Arabic, Levantine dialect, fast, clipped, and deeply insulting. "Look at them," Roman said in Arabic, his voice laced with a lazy, venomous arrogance. "They tremble like beaten dogs over a drop of wine. No spine, just cheap labor meant to clean up our messes. Pathetic." The Russian, who clearly didn't speak a word of Arabic, just chuckled uncomfortably, assuming it was a private joke about the hired help. Nora felt the blood drain from her face, only to rush back hot and blinding. 5 years. She had spent 5 years in military intelligence in Beirut and Damascus. She had translated intercepts from men who would make Roman look like a choir boy. She had listened to people die in that language. She knew the cadence, the slang, the weight of every single syllable. She was exhausted. She was in debt. She was sick of being invisible. Nora straightened up. She didn't shrink back. She didn't look at the floor. She locked eyes with Roman. The restaurant was dead silent, save for the hum of the air conditioning. "A stray dog still bites," Nora said. Her Arabic was flawless, her accent carrying the sharp, guttural edge of the Damascus streets. "And it takes a coward to insult a woman in a language he assumes she is too stupid to understand. Wipe your own messes." She dropped the white cloth on the table, right over the red stain. The Russian blinked, thoroughly confused. Roman didn't move, not a muscle. The bored expression vanished from his face, replaced by a sudden, intense stillness. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. David, the manager, materialized from the shadows, pale as a sheet, though he didn't know what had just been said. He just recognized the shift in atmospheric pressure. "Is there a problem, sir?" David stammered. Roman's eyes remained fixed on Nora. He studied her face, taking in the cheap uniform, the tired bags under her eyes, the defiant set of her jaw. He looked at her not with anger, but like she was a complex math equation he had just discovered written on a dive bar wall. "No problem," Roman said softly, switching back to English. "The waitress was just educating me. I'm so sorry, sir. She'll be replaced immediately." "Leave her!" Roman cut him off. He didn't raise his voice, but the command was absolute. "She finishes the service." Nora's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She picked up the wine bottle, finished pouring the Russian's glass with hands that absolutely refused to shake, and walked away. Every step toward the kitchen felt like walking a plank. She had just called a mafia boss a coward to his face. She was dead. The rest of the shift was a blur of adrenaline and creeping dread. Nora didn't go back to the floor. David shoved her into the dish pit, muttering prayers and curses under his breath, convinced that they were all going to be shot before closing time. By 2 a.m., the restaurant was empty. The men with the hidden guns were gone. The table was cleared. Underneath Roman's water glass, David found $500 bills. No note, just crisp, folded currency. "You're fired," David told her in the locker room, not looking her in the eye. "Don't come back tomorrow. Don't call for a reference. You're lucky you're walking out of here with your kneecaps attached. Nora didn't argue. She unpinned her name tag, tossed it into her locker, and pulled on her oversized denim jacket. The cold reality of her situation was settling in, freezing over the hot flash of pride she'd felt earlier. She was unemployed. Her rent was due in 3 days. The collection agency handling her brother's hospital bills had started calling her neighbor's phone. And she had just insulted a man who could make her disappear with a text message. Nora pushed out the heavy steel back door into the alley. The night air was freezing, smelling of wet asphalt and rotting garbage. A steady drizzle had begun to fall, slicking the cobblestones. She dug into her pocket for a cigarette, a habit she'd successfully kicked 3 years ago, but picked up again at exactly 1:15 a.m. tonight. She put the cigarette between her lips and flicked her cheap plastic lighter. It sparked, but didn't catch. A shadow detached itself from the brick wall near the dumpsters. Nora froze, her thumb slipping off the lighter. A flame flared to her left. A silver Zippo. Holding it was Roman. He was alone. No guards. No thick-necked Russians. Just him, standing in the cold rain in a $3,000 suit, holding a flame out for a broke waitress. Nora stared at the flame, then at his face. The shadows cast by the lighter made his cheekbones look sharper, his eyes darker. "You're going to kill me in an alley?" Nora asked, her voice rasping slightly. "That feels cliché even for you." Roman didn't smile. He kept the lighter steady. "If I wanted you dead, you wouldn't have made it to the dish pit. Light the cigarette, Nora. The wind is picking up." She hesitated, then leaned in, drawing the flame into the tobacco. The cherry glowed red. She stepped back, exhaling a long, thin stream of gray smoke into the damp air. He snapped the lighter shut. The metallic click echoed in the narrow space. "How do you know my name?" she asked. "I know a lot of things," Roman said, leaning against the damp brickwork, indifferent to the rain ruining his jacket. "I know your manager fired you 10 minutes ago. I know you're 28. I know you live in a third-floor walk-up in the South Ward. And I know you owe roughly $80,000 in medical debt." Nora felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. "You move fast. I have efficient employees," he replied smoothly. What my employees couldn't find, however, is why a waitress pouring wine at L'Etoile speaks Levantine Arabic, like she grew up in the Souk al-Hamidiyya. You don't have an Arab surname. You don't have dual citizenship. "I watch a lot of foreign films," Nora said deadpan. Roman's jaw tightened. It was a subtle shift, a microscopic crack in his composure. "I don't like games. I like answers. And I don't like men who hide behind languages to insult people," Nora shot back. The fear was still there, but exhaustion was rapidly overtaking it. She had nothing left to lose tonight. "So I guess neither of us is getting what we want." Roman studied her. It was that same look from the restaurant. Analytical, cold, searching for the weak point in a structure. "Military intelligence," he guessed, his voice dropping a register. "That's the posture. You stand like you've been yelled at by men with brass on their collars. You didn't flinch when the glass broke earlier in the evening. You learned it in the service, which means you're not just a speaker, you're a trained listener." Nora took another drag of her cigarette, letting the smoke burn the back of her throat. She didn't confirm or deny it. "Why are you here?" she finally asked. "You didn't wait in the rain to play 20 questions. If you aren't going to shoot me, get out of my way. I have a bus to catch." Roman pushed off the wall. He was tall, well over 6 feet, and when he stepped into her personal space, the sheer physical presence of the man was suffocating. He smelled of rain, clean linen, and faint metallic tang of ozone. "I have a problem," Roman said quietly, his eyes locked on hers. "Next week, I am hosting a series of meetings with a cartel operating out of the Mediterranean. They prefer to speak in their native tongue. I speak it, as you know. But I need someone else in the room. Hire a translator." "Translators can be bought," Roman said cynically. "Translators have ties to my rivals. Translators leak. I need someone who doesn't exist in my world. Someone who understands the nuances of the language, the slang, the unsaid threats. Someone who is completely desperate, entirely isolated, and possessing enough nerve to look a man in the eye and call him a coward." Nora stared at him. The absurdity of it washed over her. "You want me to work for you?" "I want to buy your debt," Roman corrected. $80,000, cleared by tomorrow morning. In exchange, you sit in a room for 3 days. You listen to everything they say to each other when they think no one else understands. And you report only to me. Nora laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You're out of your mind. I'm not getting involved in whatever blood money you deal in. I pour wine. Well, I poured wine. You already are involved," Roman said, his tone utterly devoid of sympathy. "You live in a city I own. You breathe air I regulate. You're drowning in a system I profit from. I am offering you a rope. Take it or drown. I don't particularly care, but it would be a waste of a good linguist." He reached into his inner pocket, pulled out a stark black business card, and held it out to her. Nora didn't take it. She looked at the card, then at his face. "What happens after the 3 days?" she asked. "You walk away," Roman said. "Debt-free, back to being invisible, if that's what you truly want." Nora didn't take the bus. She walked the 3 miles back to her apartment in the rain, the black business card feeling like a lead weight in her pocket. Her apartment was exactly as she'd left it, cold, cramped, and smelling faintly of mildew. She tossed her keys onto the scarred wooden table and slumped onto the second-hand sofa. The red light on her cheap answering machine was blinking angrily. She hit play. "Ms. Hayes, this is Carter and Associates regarding the outstanding balance for Thomas Hayes. We have secured a court order for wage garnishment. We will be contacting your employer, L'Etoile, on Monday morning to initiate the process. Please call us to..." Nora hit the delete button. She dropped her head into her hands. Tommy, her younger brother. A bad car accident, a massive spinal surgery, and a healthcare system designed to grind the vulnerable into dust. He was in a rehabilitation facility upstate, completely unaware that his sister was sinking under the weight of keeping him there. Wage garnishment meant she wouldn't make rent. Being fired meant the garnishment would bounce, leading to further legal action. She pulled the black card from her pocket. It had no logo, no name, just a 10-digit phone number embossed in matte silver. It was 3:30 a.m. She picked up her cell phone and dialed. It rang once. "You're awake," Roman's voice came through the speaker. Smooth, dark, betraying no sleepiness. "If I do this," Nora said, her voice tight, skipping any pretense of a greeting, "I want the debt cleared before I step foot in whatever room you want me in. I want proof, account, zeroed out." "Done," he said instantly. "It will be handled by sunrise." Nora gripped the phone tighter. "And I don't carry a gun. I don't handle anything illegal. I am a pair of ears. Nothing more." There was a brief silence on the line. She could almost hear the cynical amusement radiating through the cellular towers. "You have an incredibly naive view of how my world works, Nora. But fine. You are a pair of ears. A car will pick you up on Tuesday at 8 a.m. Dress better than you did tonight." The line went dead. Nora stared at the phone. She had just made a deal with the devil over a dropped call. Monday was agonizing. She cleaned her apartment twice. She checked her bank accounts and the collection agency portal obsessively. At 6:15 a.m., the balance on Tommy's medical debt portal, which had sat at a terrifying $82,450 for 6 months, suddenly refreshed. Balance, $0.000. Status, paid in full. Nora felt a physical weight lift off her chest, so profound her knees actually buckled. She sat on the kitchen floor, breathing hard, tears prickling the corners of her eyes. It was over. The suffocating terror of the debt was gone. But as she sat there on the cheap linoleum, the reality of the price tag settled in. Roman hadn't just paid a bill. He had purchased her, for 3 days, at least. Tuesday morning, 7:55 am. Nora stood on the curb outside her apartment building. She wore a tailored black blazer she had bought at a thrift store and meticulously ironed dark trousers and sensible shoes. She looked professional. She felt like a fraud. At exactly 8 a.m., a sleek armored black SUV glided to a stop in front of her. The rear door opened. Roman was inside, sitting in the leather seat, reviewing a tablet. He didn't look up as she climbed in. "You're on time," he noted, his voice flat. "Military habit," Nora said, pulling the door shut. The silence inside the cabin was absolute, the heavy armor blocking out the city noise completely. "Where are we going?" "A warehouse in the industrial district," Roman said, finally setting the tablet down. He looked her over, his gaze sweeping from her shoes to her face. It wasn't a leering look, it was a tactical assessment. "The men we are meeting are the Al-Fayed brothers. They run a significant portion of the logistics through the Mediterranean ports. They are arrogant, they are violent, and they are incredibly smart." "What are you negotiating?" Nora asked. "Access," Roman said simply. "They want my routes into the city. I want their supply lines. We will speak in English. They will occasionally speak to each other in Arabic, to strategize or conceal their true intentions. You will sit behind me. You will take notes. You will not react, no matter what they say. Do you understand?" "I don't react," Nora confirmed. "I'm a ghost." Roman's lips twitched. It wasn't quite a smile. "You weren't a ghost on Friday night. You were a remarkably loud stray dog." "Friday night I wasn't being paid 80 grand to keep my mouth shut." Roman held her gaze for a long moment. There was an intense, electric friction between them. He was a man accustomed to absolute obedience and terror. She was a woman who had run out of fear years ago. "Let's hope your restraint is as good as your vocabulary," Roman said softly, turning to look out the tinted window. The SUV navigated the labyrinth of the city's underbelly, finally pulling into a massive, cavernous warehouse near the docks. The building smelled of old oil, salt water, and rust. Inside, a makeshift conference room had been constructed using heavy shipping containers. It was raw, brutalist, and screamed of illegal money. 4 men stood near the center table. They were distinctly Middle Eastern, dressed in sharp, European-cut suits that contrasted wildly with the dirty warehouse. As Roman and Nora approached, the leader of the group, a tall man with a thick beard and cold eyes, stepped forward. "Roman," the man said in heavily accented English, spreading his arms. "My friend, it is good to see you." "Tariq," Roman replied, his tone perfectly neutral. They shook hands. Tariq's gaze drifted over Roman's shoulder, landing on Nora. He looked her up and down, his eyes lingering on her face, before he turned back to Roman. "Who is the girl?" Tariq said in rapid-fire Arabic, speaking directly to the man beside him, not realizing Nora understood every syllable. "She looks soft. Is he bringing his whores to business meetings now? The Americans are getting weak." Nora stood perfectly still. Her face remained a mask of polite, professional indifference. She didn't blink. She didn't flush. Roman, who also understood the insult perfectly, didn't react either. He just pulled out a chair at the table. "This is my associate, Nora," Roman said in English. "She handles my documentation. Shall we begin?" Tariq smirked, pulling out his own chair. "Let the little whore take her notes," he murmured in Arabic to his brother. "We'll bleed him dry by noon." Nora sat down behind Roman, opening her leather folio. She uncapped her pen. It was going to be a long 3 days. The warehouse was drafty, but the air around the table felt stagnant, thick with the smell of stale coffee and barely concealed violence. For 3 hours, the negotiations dragged on in perfectly polite, heavily accented English. They discussed shipping lanes, customs officials, and percentage cuts with the detached boredom of middle managers reviewing a quarterly budget. Nora sat a foot behind Roman's left shoulder. Her pen moved steadily across the legal pad. To the untrained eye, she was just a secretary, taking minutes, but her pad was divided into 2 columns. The left was English. The right was Arabic. Tariq Al-Fayed leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "The eastern docks are currently problematic, Roman. Increased Coast Guard patrols. We would require a higher premium to move your specialized cargo through our channels there. 30%, Roman didn't blink. 15, the patrols are a temporary measure for the election cycle. They'll vanish by November. Tariq sighed, a theatrical display of regret. He turned his head slightly toward his younger brother, Sami. "Push him on the western routes," Tariq murmured in Arabic, his tone dropping the polite veneer entirely. "The harbor master on the east side already took our bribe. We own the docks outright. Make him think he's winning the east so we can tax him double on the west." Sami nodded imperceptibly. Nora's hand didn't stutter. She wrote, "Harbor Master East already bought. They own it. Pushing west to double tax." She waited for a natural lull in the conversation. When Roman reached for his water glass, Nora slid the legal pad half an inch forward, just into his peripheral vision. Roman's eyes flicked down. He read the note in a fraction of a second. His expression remained utterly unchanged. He took a sip of water, set the glass down, and looked back at Tariq. "I've reconsidered," Roman said smoothly. 15 is insulting for the risk you're taking on the eastern docks. I'll concede. I won't use the east at all. We will move everything through the west, standard rate, 20%. Tariq's smile froze. It was a microscopic tightening of the muscles around his mouth, but Nora caught it. "How did he know?" Sami hissed in Arabic, barely moving his lips. Did someone talk? Shut up, Tariq snapped back in the same language. He's guessing. Call his bluff. The West is complicated, Roman. Tariq switched back to English, clearing his throat. The unions there are less friendly to our kind of business. I have the unions handled, Roman countered, leaning back in his chair. The posture was relaxed, but the energy radiating off him was lethal. He was cornering them, and he was doing it with their own playbook. 20% on the West, or I bypass your ships entirely and use the Sicilians. They are always hungry for new contracts. Tariq stared at Roman. The silence stretched, tight as piano wire. Finally, Tariq gave a sharp, curt nod. 20% on the West. Excellent, Roman said. He stood up, buttoning his jacket. We will reconvene tomorrow to finalize the land routes. Have your numbers ready, Tariq. I dislike wasting time. Nora closed her folio. She stood up, keeping her eyes averted, playing the part of the submissive assistant to perfection. She followed Roman toward the exit, feeling the heavy, suspicious glares of the Al-Fayed brothers burning into her spine. Once they were inside the armored SUV and the heavy doors sealed shut with a pressurized hiss, the tension finally broke. Nora let out a long, shaky breath, slumping back into the leather seat. Roman poured 2 fingers of amber liquid from a hidden crystal decanter and offered the glass to her. She looked at the glass, then at him. I thought you didn't drink. I don't. You look like you need it. She took the glass. The whiskey burned going down, but it settled the tremor in her hands. They own the East Docks, completely. They were trying to manipulate you into paying a premium for a route they already controlled, just to use it as leverage for the West. I know. I read your note, Roman said. He was watching her again, that same analytical stare. You didn't flinch, not once, not even when Sami suggested they cut my throat in the parking lot and take the routes by force. Nora paused, the glass halfway to her lips. She hadn't written that part down. You speak Arabic. Levantine, Roman corrected. The Al-Fayeds are Egyptian. Their dialect is heavily localized. I catch the structure, the basic verbs. I don't catch the nuances. You do. Sami is all talk, Nora said, staring out the tinted window at the passing gray cityscape. He doesn't have the stomach for a hit. He taps his foot when he lies, and his eyes dart to his brother for permission before he even breathes. He's a follower. Tariq is the one you have to watch. Roman remained silent for a long moment. The only sound was the hum of the tires on the wet asphalt. $80,000, Roman said quietly. For a woman who reads a room better than men who have survived in this business for decades. You're wasted pouring wine, Nora. I poured wine because it didn't require me to analyze men who want to cut people's throats, she shot back, her cynicism flaring. I did my time reading monsters. I got out. I'm just here to pay a debt. No one ever really gets out, Roman replied. The certainty in his voice wasn't a threat. It was a bleak statement of fact. They just change cages. Day 2 was ugly from the moment they walked in. The Al-Fayeds had clearly spent the night realizing they had been outmaneuvered. Tariq's polite veneer was gone, replaced by a bristling, barely contained hostility. He paced the length of the warehouse floor, while Sami and the 2 bodyguards stood by the table, their hands resting uncomfortably close to the holsters beneath their jackets. Roman sat at the table, a portrait of absolute stillness. Nora took her place behind him, opening her folio. We have a problem with the land routes, Tariq began. not bothering to sit. He spoke English, but the cadence was aggressive. My associates in the trucking syndicates are demanding a larger cut for the risk. The cargo you move is heavy. The penalties are federal. The cargo is untraceable, Roman replied calmly. And your trucking associates are a myth, Tariq. You own the rigs through a shell company in Delaware. Don't negotiate with me on behalf of your own ghosts. Tariq stopped pacing. He stared at Roman, his eyes narrowing to dark slits. He was losing ground, and men like Tariq didn't lose ground without drawing blood. Tariq turned his attention to Nora. It was sudden, a predatory pivot. He walked slowly toward her, ignoring Roman. "Tell me, little bird," Tariq said in rapid, guttural Arabic, leaning down so his face was inches from hers. "Does he share his wealth with you? Or does he just use you to warm his bed when the numbers get boring?" Nora didn't move. Her heart thumped a heavy, painful rhythm against her ribs, but her face remained a blank slate. She stared straight ahead, focusing on the rough texture of the brick wall across the room. She was back in the interrogation rooms in Beirut. Breathe in for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. She did not understand him. She was just an American secretary. Tariq leaned closer. She could smell the expensive cologne and the sour tang of anxiety sweat underneath it. "I wonder what you sound like when you scream," Tariq whispered in Arabic. "Maybe I'll ask him to give you to me as part of the deal. He wouldn't care. You're nothing, just a piece of meat in a suit." Nora's grip on her pen tightened until her knuckles turned white, but she didn't break eye contact with the brick wall. She didn't blink. She didn't let her breathing hitch. Suddenly, Roman stood up. The metal legs of his chair scraped harshly against the concrete floor, a jarring sound that echoed off the high ceiling. Tariq stepped back instinctively. Roman didn't yell. He didn't draw a weapon. He simply stepped between Tariq and Nora. The height difference wasn't massive, but Roman's presence seemed to suck all the oxygen out of the room. "My assistant," Roman said, his voice dropping into a register that made the hair on Nora's arms stand up, "does not speak your language, Tariq. But I speak enough to know when the tone shifts from business to disrespect." Tariq forced a laugh, holding his hands up in mock surrender. "It was a joke, Roman, a crude joke between men. We are under a lot of stress." "The stress," Roman said, stepping into Tariq's personal space, "is entirely of your own making. You sit down. We finish the land routes. Or I walk out that door, and your shells in Delaware get a visit from the IRS by Friday." Tariq held Roman's gaze for 3 long seconds. The air crackled. Then slowly, Tariq backed down. He pulled out his chair and sat. Roman turned back. He glanced at Nora. Just a fleeting look, but she saw it. A silent question. "Are you intact?" She gave him a fractional nod. "I'm fine." She wasn't fine. When they finally got back to the SUV hours later, the adrenaline crash hit her like a physical blow. Her hands shook so badly she couldn't clasp her seatbelt. Roman reached over. He didn't say a word. He just took the metal buckle from her trembling fingers and clicked it into place. His knuckles brushed against her hip. His skin was warm. "He was testing the room," Roman said quietly, leaning back into his own seat. "He suspects I have an edge. He was trying to see if it was you." "I didn't react," Nora said, her voice tight. She hated how fragile she sounded. "I know." Roman looked at her. The clinical detachment was gone. replaced by something entirely different: respect. Deep, undeniable respect. I've seen hardened men break under Tariq's intimidation. You didn't even blink. He called me meat, Nora rasped, staring at her hands. He said he wanted to hear me scream. It wasn't about the business. It was just cruelty. It's about control, Roman corrected gently. Men like Tariq use cruelty because they lack true power. True power doesn't need to raise its voice. It doesn't need to threaten. And what do you use, Roman? She asked, turning to look at him. The exhaustion made her reckless. You threaten. You bought my life for 80 grand. How is that different? Roman didn't flinch. He absorbed the accusation. I bought your debt. I didn't buy you. You can walk out of this car right now, Nora. The debt is paid. The ledger is clean. If you come back tomorrow, it's because you choose to. He reached up and pressed a button on the ceiling console. The locks clicked. The heavy doors unsealed. Nora looked at the door. She looked out at the rain-slicked streets. She was free. Her brother was safe. She could go back to the damp apartment, find a new diner to wait tables at, and disappear. She looked back at Roman. He wasn't watching her leave. He was just waiting. She reached over and pressed the button on the console. The doors hissed shut. The locks engaged with a heavy clack. Pick me up at 8, she said. Day 3, the final stretch. The air in the warehouse was different today. The aggressive posturing was gone, replaced by a deadly, quiet focus. They were finalizing the transfer of physical assets: warehouses, safe houses, drop points. This was where the real money lay, and where the real danger hid. Tariq was compliant, too compliant. He agreed to Roman's terms with minimal pushback. He signed the preliminary agreements. He smiled. It made Nora's skin crawl. She listened intently, filtering the droning English for any slip into Arabic. It came 2 hours in, while Roman was reviewing a ledger. Tariq leaned back, stretching his arms. He looked at Sami. The north corridor is clear, Tariq said conversationally in Arabic, as if discussing the weather. Tell the men in the vans outside. When the American leaves, they box his SUV in at the intersection. No survivors. We take the paperwork from his corpse. Nora's blood turned to ice. It wasn't a negotiation tactic. It was an execution order. Tariq was going to give Roman everything on paper, then kill him and take it all back before the ink dried. Sami nodded, slowly reaching into his jacket for his phone. Nora couldn't pass a note. Sami was watching the table. Tariq was watching Roman. If she wrote anything down, they would see it. She couldn't speak. She had seconds. Nora knocked her pen off the table. It clattered loudly onto the concrete floor, rolling toward Roman's boots. Tariq and Sami jerked their heads toward the sound. Apologies, Nora muttered in English, immediately ducking under the table to retrieve it. Down in the shadows, hidden from the Al-Fayeds, she grabbed the pen. Roman's leg was right next to her. She pressed the hard plastic tip of the pen into the fabric of his trousers, right above the knee. She didn't write words. She wrote symbols, military shorthand. Something Roman would know if he was as smart as she thought he was. X, ambush. O, outside. Line through the O, no exit. She felt Roman's legs stiffen. He understood. Nora sat back up, placing the pen on the legal pad. Her face was flushed from bending over, a perfect alibi for the spike in her heart rate. Roman didn't look at her. He didn't look at the notepad. He looked at the ledger in his hands. "These coordinates for the North Warehouse," Roman said, his voice entirely flat. "They are incorrect." Tarek frowned. "They are the exact coordinates, Roman. Check the—" Roman didn't let him finish. In one fluid, explosive motion, he flipped the heavy wooden table entirely over. It crashed backward, slamming into Tariq and Sammy, pinning them momentarily against the shipping container behind them. "Down!" Roman roared, grabbing Nora by the collar of her jacket and hauling her to the concrete floor behind the overturned table. Gunfire erupted. The deafening crack of automatic weapons echoed through the warehouse as Tariq's bodyguards opened fire. The heavy wood of the table splintered and exploded above them, raining wood chips and dust onto Nora's hair. Roman's hand was on her head, pressing her down, shielding her body with his own. He pulled a heavy, matte black pistol from his waistband. He didn't fire blindly. He waited. 1 second, 2 seconds. The gunfire paused as the bodyguards moved to flank the table. Roman rolled out from cover. 2 suppressed shots spit from his weapon. Pfft. 2 heavy thuds hit the concrete. Roman was back behind the table before the echo died. "Kill him!" Tariq screamed in Arabic, struggling to free himself from the heavy oak table. Roman looked at Nora. His eyes were wide, the pupils dilated with adrenaline, but his hands were perfectly steady. "Van's outside?" he asked over the ringing in her ears. "Intersection," Nora gasped, coughing on the dust. "They're boxing you in." Roman pressed a button on his earpiece. "Leo, ambush at the intersection. Clear the exit. Now." He grabbed Nora's arm. "We move to the SUV. Stay low. Do not stop moving." They broke from cover. The warehouse was a chaotic mess of shouting and dust. Sammy had managed to draw his weapon, but his hands were shaking so violently his shots went wide, shattering the glass of an office window 10 feet above their heads. Roman returned fire, a single shot that caught Sammy in the shoulder, spinning the younger man around and dropping him to the floor with a shriek. They hit the heavy steel doors of the warehouse just as Roman's SUV reversed violently through the entrance, smashing the doors off their hinges. The armor-plated vehicle ground to a halt, the rear door flying open. Roman threw Nora inside, diving in right behind her as bullets sparked off the reinforced chassis. "Go!" Roman shouted to the driver. The SUV tires squealed, finding purchase on the concrete, and launched forward. As they tore out of the industrial park, Nora looked out the back window. 2 black vans were completely engulfed in flames at the intersection. Roman's advanced security team having neutralized the trap with ruthless efficiency. They drove in silence for 10 minutes. The adrenaline was bleeding out of Nora now, leaving her trembling violently, cold sweat slicking her skin. She curled her knees to her chest in the massive leather seat. Roman holstered his weapon. He looked at her. He reached across the console. He didn't offer a drink this time. He pulled her gently by the shoulders, pulling her across the seat until she was pressed against his side. He wrapped a heavy arm around her, securing her against him. He was solid. He was warm. He smelled like gunpowder and ozone. Nora didn't pull away. She buried her face in the fabric of his ruined suit jacket, her hands gripping his lapels like a lifeline. "You saved my life," Roman said, his voice a low rumble against her ear. "You saved mine," Nora mumbled into his chest. "The contract is finished," Roman said quietly, resting his chin against the top of her head. "The debt is paid. The work is done." Nora closed her eyes. The thought of going back to the diner, back to the invisible life, felt impossible now. She had stepped back into the fire, and she realized, with a terrifying clarity, that she missed the heat. She tilted her head up, looking at his sharp jaw, the faint stubble on his chin, the cold eyes that were currently looking at her, with a heat that had nothing to do with gunfire. "I don't think," Nora whispered, her voice rough, "that I want to be invisible anymore." Roman's grip on her tightened. A slow, dangerous smile finally broke across his face. "Good," he said, "because I have no intention of letting you go." Roman's safe house wasn't a damp basement. It was a 40-story penthouse made of glass, steel, and shadow. It sat above the city like a vulture on a telephone wire. The private elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. Roman stepped out first, his hand instinctively hovering near the holster at his waist. The paranoia was hardwired. Once he verified the massive, open-concept living space was empty, he dropped his hand and shrugged off his ruined suit jacket. He tossed it onto a pristine white leather sofa. It left a faint smear of brick dust and soot. Nora stepped out behind him. She felt entirely out of place. Her thrift store blazer smelled like cordite and fear. "Bathroom is down the hall to the right," Roman said. His voice was strained. He walked toward a heavy oak wet bar and poured 2 inches of neat vodka into a tumbler. He didn't offer her one this time. He drank it straight down. Nora didn't move toward the hall. She watched him. The adrenaline was finally leaving her system, replaced by a hyper-aware clarity. She watched the way he favored his left side, the way his breathing was too shallow. "Take your shirt off," Nora said. Roman stopped, the empty glass in his hand. He looked back at her over his shoulder. The exhaustion in his eyes was profound. "It's been a long day, Nora. I don't have the energy for—" "You're bleeding," she interrupted, her voice flat. He looked down at his left side. A dark, wet stain was slowly spreading across the crisp, white cotton of his dress shirt, just above the ribs. A ricochet. He hadn't even noticed. Roman set the glass down. He unbuttoned the shirt with steady mechanical movements and let it drop to the floor. His torso was a map of old violence. Scars crisscrossed his ribs and shoulders, some thin and surgical, others jagged and ugly. The new wound was a vicious graze along his oblique. It wasn't deep, but it was bleeding sluggishly. Nora walked past him into the kitchen. She found a first aid kit under the sink, a massive professional-grade trauma bag. Men like Roman didn't rely on Band-Aids. She hauled it onto the marble island, pulled out gauze, antiseptic, and medical tape. "Sit," she ordered, pointing to one of the heavy bar stools. Roman sat. He watched her tear open the antiseptic wipes. "You have a terrible bedside manner." "I was military intelligence, not a field medic," she replied, stepping between his knees. She pressed the chemical wipe directly against the wound. Roman hissed, his jaw locking, his hands gripping the edge of the marble counter until his knuckles turned white. He didn't pull away. "I'm sorry," Nora muttered, wiping away the drying blood to inspect the damage. "No, you aren't." She paused, looking up at him. Their faces were inches apart. He was right. She wasn't sorry. The sting was grounding. It meant they were alive. "It just needs to be cleaned and taped," she concluded, breaking the eye contact to focus on the gauze. "You got lucky. A millimeter to the right, and it would have shattered the floating rib." "I don't believe in luck," Roman said quietly. "I believe in variables. Today, You were the variable Tariq didn't account for. Nora taped the gauze down tight. Her fingers lingered for a fraction of a second against the warm, hard muscle of his side. She pulled back, turning to pack the supplies back into the trauma kit. "What happens now?" she asked, her back to him. "Now, Tariq realizes he failed," Roman stated. "He will go to ground. He will consolidate his men, and he will look for leverage. He knows he can't hit me directly again. The warehouse was his one shot at a clean sweep." "Leverage," Nora repeated. The word tasted like ash. She turned around. Roman was watching her carefully. The silence in the penthouse stretched, thick and heavy. "You bought my debt," Nora said, her voice shaking slightly, but not from fear, from realization. "The collection agency, the hospital, the paper trail." Roman's eyes darkened. He understood exactly where her mind had just gone. "When Tariq's men dig into who the woman at the table was," Nora continued, her breath speeding up, "when they realize I wasn't just a secretary, they won't come after me. They'll look for what I care about. They'll find the financial records." "I scrubbed the records, Nora." "You bought a debt from a legal entity in New York," she shouted, the military discipline finally cracking. "There is a digital footprint. Tariq has money. Money buys hackers, and hackers find footprints. My brother is in a facility upstate. He can't walk, Roman." Roman stood up. He ignored the fresh pain in his side. He crossed the space between them and gripped her shoulders. His hands were heavy, grounding anchors. "Listen to me," Roman commanded. His voice was an absolute zero. "No one touches your brother. I have a 6-man security detail en route to the rehab facility as we speak. They will lock the floor down. If a fly buzzes in Arabic near that building, they will kill it. Do you understand?" Nora stared at him, her chest heaving. She searched his face for the lie, for the manipulation. There was none, just violent, unyielding certainty. "Why?" she whispered. "The contract is over. You owe me nothing." "Because you belong to me now," Roman said. It wasn't a threat. It was a vow. He didn't wait for her to process it. He pulled her flush against his chest and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. There was no romance in it. It was a collision. It was the frantic, bruising desperation of two people who had just walked out of a slaughterhouse. Nora tasted blood, whiskey, and the sharp bite of adrenaline. She kissed him back with equal violence, her hands tangling in his short ash-brown hair, pulling him closer. She had spent 3 years trying to shrink, trying to be a ghost in a diner. Roman didn't want her to shrink. He saw the sharp, dangerous edges she had tried to file down, and he wanted them. He backed her up against the cool marble of the island, his hands dropping to her waist, lifting her effortlessly. Nora wrapped her legs around his hips. The world outside the glass walls, the debt, the cartel, the rain, ceased to exist. The burner phone on the glass coffee table vibrated at 3:14 a.m. Nora was awake. She sat wrapped in a heavy charcoal blanket on the edge of the sofa, watching the city lights bleed through the rain. Roman stepped out of the bedroom, pulling on a clean black t-shirt. He picked up the phone, listened for 10 seconds, and hung up. "Tariq is alive," Roman said. "Sami bled out in the van on the way to their safe house. Tariq is unhinged. He's burning through his local contacts trying to find out where we went." Nora stood up, letting the blanket fall. She wore one of Roman's oversized shirts. "Did he find the hospital?" "He found the city name," Roman replied. walking over to a built-in safe hidden behind a piece of modern art on the wall. He punched in a code. My men at the facility reported 2 unidentified vehicles circling the perimeter 20 minutes ago. They haven't made a move, but they are probing the defenses. Nora felt the familiar cold drop in her stomach. It wasn't panic. It was the chilling metallic calm that used to settle over her when she put on a headset in Beirut. They won't breach a guarded medical facility, Nora said, pacing the length of the room. Her mind was clicking into a higher gear. It's too messy. State police would be there in minutes. Tariq is emotional right now. He lost his brother. He wants you to feel what he feels. He wants to draw you out. Roman pulled a heavy, suppressed tactical rifle from the safe. He checked the chamber. He thinks I'll go upstate to secure the perimeter myself. Exactly. Nora turned to face him. He's setting an ambush on the highway. He wants to catch you in transit. Roman set the rifle on the table. He looked at her, his head tilted slightly. You are entirely too good at thinking like a sociopath. I spent 5 years translating their journals, she replied. I know how the architecture of their grief works. It always demands a stage. She walked over to the table and stared at the burner phone. Can your tech guy spoof a cellular signal? She asked. Roman frowned. Yes. Why? Tariq is monitoring police scanners and local radio traffic, Nora said, the plan forming rapidly in her mind. If he's hunting for us, he's listening. We don't go to him. We make him come to a ground of our choosing. We feed him a ghost. Roman leaned against the safe. Explain. I get on a radio, unencrypted frequency, but obscure enough that he'll think he intercepted a private security channel. I speak Arabic. I pretend to be a panic dispatcher for your syndicate. I broadcast a distress call saying you took a hit on the interstate heading north, that your vehicle is disabled, and you need immediate medical extraction at a specific mile marker. Roman processed the tactical layout in real time. He hears the call. He thinks I'm wounded and trapped. He reroutes his men from the hospital to the mile marker to finish the job. And when he gets to the mile marker, Nora finished, looking him dead in the eye, we are waiting in the tree line. It was a cold, brutal strategy. It required baiting a grieving man into a kill box, using his own desperation against him. Roman stared at her for a long time. The clinical detachment was gone. He looked at her like she was the most terrifying, magnificent thing he had ever seen. You pour a terrible glass of wine, Nora, Roman murmured. But you build a beautiful trap. He picked up the phone and dialed his tech team. Get me a radio transmitter and assemble the strike team. We leave in 20 minutes. The staging area was an abandoned rest stop on Route 9, 20 miles south of the decoy mile marker. The rain had intensified, turning the night into a blurred, freezing smear of gray. Nora sat in the back of an armored mobile command van, a heavy headset clamped over her ears. A microphone rested an inch from her lips. The glowing screens of the radio equipment cast a pale green light over her face. Roman stood behind her, fully kitted in tactical gear, a Kevlar vest strapped tightly over his chest. He rested a heavy hand on her shoulder. The channel is live, the tech operator, a pale kid named Elias, said from the front seat. Tariq's digital footprint shows he's scanning this cluster. If you speak, he'll catch it. Nora closed her eyes. She took a deep breath, reaching down into the darkest parts of her memory. She didn't just need to speak the language. She needed to mimic the sheer, unadulterated terror of a woman watching an empire collapse. She keyed the microphone. "Command, this is Vanguard 2!" Nora screamed in Arabic, her voice cracking with manufactured panic. "We are hit! We are hit! The boss is down! I repeat, Roman is down! We are pinned at mile marker 42. The engine block is shattered. We have heavy bleeding. Send the extraction team now. They are circling us." She released the button, letting her breath hitch in a ragged sob. She keyed it one more time. "Please, he's losing too much blood." She cut the feed. Silence filled the van, save for the hum of the servers. "Signal intercepted," Elias reported, his fingers flying across his keyboard. Burner phones pinging in the north sector are suddenly moving. They just hopped on the southbound interstate. They took the bait. Roman squeezed her shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of perfection. "Move the team to the tree line," Roman ordered over his internal comms. "Do not engage until Tariq's vehicle is entirely inside the kill zone." He turned to Nora. "You stay in the van. The doors lock from the inside. Do not open them for anyone but me." Nora pulled the headset off. She looked at the heavy assault rifle slung across his chest. "Finish it, Roman. If he walks away tonight, I'll never sleep again." "He doesn't walk away," Roman promised. He turned and vanished into the rain. Mile marker 42 was a desolate stretch of highway flanked by steep, heavily wooded embankments. At 4:45 a.m., it was entirely deserted. From the surveillance monitors inside the van, Nora watched the infrared feeds from the drones circling above. She saw the heat signatures of Roman's men, 6 ghosts buried in the mud and freezing rain along the ridge. 10 minutes later, headlights pierced the gloom. 3 black SUVs tore down the highway, pushing well over 90 miles an hour. They didn't have their lights dimmed. They were aggressive, reckless, fueled by the promise of vengeance. They slammed on their brakes, tires smoking on the wet asphalt as they reached the empty stretch of road where Roman was supposed to be bleeding out. The vehicles formed a defensive triangle. Doors flew open. 10 men spilled out into the rain, weapons raised, sweeping the tree line with flashlights. From the lead SUV stepped Tariq. Even on the grainy green thermal feed, Nora recognized his imposing silhouette. He held a submachine gun, screaming orders at his men to find the wreck. He realized a fraction of a second too late that there was no wreck. "Execute," Roman's voice crackled coldly over the comms sitting on the console in front of Nora. The tree line erupted. It wasn't a shootout. It was an extermination. Roman's team utilized suppressed weapons and high ground advantage. Tariq's men dropped in a synchronized, brutal wave. The crossfire was mathematically precise, designed to eliminate the foot soldiers while isolating the leader. Within 30 seconds, 9 men lay dead on the asphalt. Tariq was hit in the leg. He collapsed against the rear tire of his SUV, his weapon clattering out of reach. He scrambled frantically backward in the mud, leaving a dark trail on the pavement. The thermal feeds showed a single figure detaching from the tree line and walking slowly down the embankment. Roman. Nora watched the monitor. Her heart wasn't racing. Her hands weren't shaking. She felt a profound, chilling stillness. She pressed the button to patch into Roman's earpiece. "He's reaching for an ankle holster," Nora said into the microphone, her eyes locked on Tariq's heat signature on the screen. Roman didn't verbally acknowledge her. On the screen, she saw him raise his rifle, casually track the movement, and put a single round through Tariq's right shoulder. Tariq screamed, thrashing in the mud. Roman stopped 3 feet from him. The drone feed zoomed in, switching from thermal to night vision. Tariq looked up at the man standing over him. The arrogance was completely gone, replaced by the naked, pathetic terror of a man who suddenly realized he was out of time. He began begging, pleading in broken English, then switching to rapid, desperate Arabic. Roman just stood there in the pouring rain, listening. He let the man exhaust himself. He let Tariq feel the full, crushing weight of his failure. Then Roman reached up and tapped his earpiece. "Nora," Roman's voice came through the speaker in the van. It was entirely steady. "Translate for him." Nora leaned closer to the microphone. The cynical waitress was dead. The frightened girl drowning in medical debt was dead. She pressed the transmit button. "Tell him," Nora said in flawless Arabic, her voice echoing out of a loudspeaker hidden in the grille of Roman's parked SUV 100 yards away, "that the stray dog remembers every word. Tell him the coward dies in the mud, right where he belongs." Tariq's head snapped toward the tree line, his eyes wide with horrified recognition. He heard the voice. He understood exactly whose trap he had walked into. Roman didn't give him time to process it. He raised his sidearm. One shot. The feed went still. The flashing lights of the cleanup crew's flatbed trucks appeared on the horizon 10 minutes later. Roman's syndicate operated with terrifying efficiency. The bodies, the vehicles, the blood on the asphalt, it would all be gone before the morning commuters hit the road. The heavy steel door of the command van unlocked and slid open. Roman stepped inside. He was soaked to the bone, covered in mud, and smelled sharply of copper and gunpowder. He slung the rifle off his shoulder and let it drop heavily to the metal floor. He looked at Nora. She hadn't moved from the console. She was staring at him, taking in the violence that clung to him like a second skin. "It's done," Roman said. "I know, I watched," she replied. He stepped closer, invading her space, searching her face for regret, for trauma, for the fragile girl he had met in the alley outside the restaurant. "Are you afraid?" he asked quietly. Nora stood up. She closed the distance between them, ignoring the mud and the blood on his vest. She reached up, her hands framing his face, her thumbs brushing against his jawline. "No," she said, and it was the truest thing she had said in years. "I'm awake." Roman let out a slow breath, his forehead resting against hers. The war was over. The empire was secure. And he had found the only person in the city capable of standing beside him in the dark. "We need to pack up your apartment," Roman murmured, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her flush against his armored chest. "You aren't going back to the South Ward." Nora almost smiled, a small, sharp smirk that held zero innocence. "I know," she whispered. "I have much better things to do." That's how you rewrite the rules of the underworld. Nora didn't just survive the devil. She learned how to sit beside him on the throne. The frightened waitress is dead, and in her place is a queen forged in fire, blood, and flawless Arabic. What did you think of Nora and Roman's brutal ascent to the top? If you loved this gritty, intense mafia romance, hit that like button and share it with someone who appreciates a truly dangerous power couple. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell for more dark, grounded stories where the heroine actually fights back.